I hate to say like COBRA is always for like when you terminate because it's not. It's the best way to describe it would be like anytime you're losing those benefits. So, you could be a part timer. So you could be full time, moving to part time, and you're no longer eligible for benefits. So
Oh,
that's considered a qualifying event. You're now able to continue those benefits, even though you still actually work there.
welcome to Mission to Grow, the small business guide to cash, compliance, and the war for talent. I'm your host, Mike Vannoy. Each week, we'll bring you experts in accounting, finance, human resources, benefits, employment law, and more. You'll learn ways to access capital through creative financing and tax strategies, tactical information you need to stay compliant with ever-changing employment laws, and people strategies you need to win the war for talent. Mission to Grow is sponsored by Asure. Asure helps more than 100,000 businesses get access to capital, stay compliant, and develop the talent they need to grow. Enjoy the show. COBRA. Every employer, especially small businesses that are growing, need to know about COBRA. COBRA, it's a goofy acronym, stands for the Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act. It became a law back in 1986 when Ronald Reagan signed it, and it's impacted employers ever since. Most, I'd say, mid-size and larger companies, they've been across this threshold, they understand it. But especially SMBs, small businesses that are growing, that don't yet have to comply or maybe have to comply but don't realize it yet. This is a really important topic that everybody needs to understand. So got the perfect guest to unpack this topic today. She's been in the benefits HR space for 25 years. Her first job in college was in HR, specifically helping with open enrollment in benefits for a company. So she's about as young as you can possibly get. I'm helping you out here, Heather, and still have 25 years of industry experience in anything. She is a PHR, this professional and HR certified professional from SHRM, and she leads Assure's benefits administration practice. Welcome to the show, Heather James.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Heather, right from the top, I think a lot of people think that they know what COBRA is. We're going to try to dispel any myths and make sure everybody really does by the end of this conversation. I think there's plenty of small employers don't even realize what it is yet, because when you start out, you get employee number 1, you go to employee number 10, and all the way up to the magic number of 20 here. You don't even have to comply with this law, so you probably wouldn't have known about it even. And if you're a small business owner, you know your craft, your trade, your customers. You don't know HR laws, so this one can sneak up on folks. How about we start by just unpacking what is COBRA and maybe including why the weird, silly name?
I don't really know where the actual name came from. Never really thought about it that way, but it can be a pain, and a lot of people don't understand how that all works. But it's definitely something that you have to follow and comply with. And it is a federal guideline that employers do have to offer that continuation of those benefits for the employees, and not only their employees. And I think that's a big misunderstanding too, is this also impacts the dependents. So if you have a spouse, if you have children on your plan, everybody's eligible to continue those benefits. And this is going to impact, any group that, has 20 or more employees. They're offering major group plans. This could be medical, dental, vision, employee assistance programs, FSAs, HRAs. You could have an employee simply just enrolled in dental. Some of the common mistakes that we see from, some of the groups that we work with is they're like, well, I didn't send a COBRA packet because, he only had vision, or he didn't want it. So that's what we're here to do, is to help educate, to make sure that they fully understand that, they don't have to have just a medical plan. They can have just dental, just vision. And it's not even just terminations. I think that's the biggest misunderstanding too out there, is it's, you could voluntarily leave your organization. You are eligible for COBRA. Any potential there that you're losing your benefits due to a qualifying event. Maybe you get a divorce, maybe your child turns 26 and now is ready to go on their own. COBRA allows that extension of those benefits until they find other benefits that, they can join.
Heather, let's back up a bit for those folks who don't yet know what COBRA is, or maybe have an idea. Let's get really remedial. Let's define what COBRA is. What does it require of businesses, and which businesses must comply?
Sure. Yeah. So this is going to be, 20 or more employees. You're offering your major group plans. Again, it's your medical plans, your dentals, your visions, you know, and even your flexible spending accounts. So a lot of times those get missed because they're like, oh well, they don't want to contribute. It's no longer going to be pre-taxed. But if you're underspent on your FSA, yeah, absolutely.
So first of all, it's all employers with 20 or more employees who offer benefits, right?
That is correct.
So if you're 21 or 25 or say 49 employees, because 50 or more, you must, according to the Affordable Care Act, provide benefits. But if you're over 20 employees and do not provide benefits to your employees, do you have to comply?
No. If you don't have those plans in place, no.
Right. So at the highest level, the COBRA federal law. Remember, I said that it's signed in the law back in '86 by Ronald Reagan. So this is a federal law, not a state, that all employers, 20 or more employees who provide health benefits to their employees, must comply with COBRA. Now, what does compliance mean? There's a whole bunch of things, right? So it's the continuation of benefits. I think a lot of people think COB in COBRA stands for continuation of benefits. It's not. It really is. It's so stupid. Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act. This benefits continuation was just a component of that law, and the acronym COBRA just stuck. Oddly, he described what it is. So take us through what compliance means. So if you're a small business, you got 20 more employees, you provide benefits of any kind to your employees, what does the law require of you?
So from the time that there is a qualifying event, whether it's termination, involuntary, or any of those other qualifying events that we kind of touch base on, the employer has 30 days from the date that the benefits end to get a notice out to that employee. So whether they're setting it out themselves, whether they're using a third-party TPA, they have 30 days to get those notices out to their employees,
and notifying employees of what?
Notifying them of their continuation rights. So these are going to be the same plans that they had as an active employee or on the active benefits. So they are being offered the continuation of the same group benefits that they had as an active employee.
Okay. So the law says 20 or more employees, you offer benefits to your employees. If there's a qualifying event, we'll get into more nitty gritty about what does and doesn't qualify as a qualifying event. But you, by law, must offer those benefits to that employee post-employment, right? So I'm on track so far.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what else does the law require? Does the law say? So let's say it was $1,000 a month for a family, and I, as the employer, was paying $800 of that, and my employee had to pay $200 a month. I'm just doing that for easy math.
Mm-hmm.
Am I obligated as an employer to continue to pay $800 a month to that employer? What does the law say about who pays for those benefits?
No, the law states that the employee pays for those benefits. So, and that's where I think a lot of the angst comes from the employees is they're like, this is so expensive. COBRA is so expensive. But COBRA is not the actual insurance. COBRA is the continuation of those rich group plans that you had, but you're no longer seeing the employer contribution. Now you're seeing the full-fledged cost. Kind of makes you appreciate your employer when you see the full price tag of what that looks like. But yes, the employee is responsible for that full cost. And even in some cases, also an additional 2% administration fee.
So think back, everyone. Some folks can't think back because they weren't around there in the workforce. But go back to 1985, 86. That we take this kind of stuff for granted today, but then like the Affordable Care Act was intended to offer benefits for people or kind of these gaps, right? To make sure more people got insured. Up until COBRA and until 86, if you lost your job, you could be out of benefits, no health insurance. You could literally get in a car accident or have a heart attack on your drive home from being fired, and you have no insurance, right?
Right.
So that's what this law was really all about, is designed to protect employees. Now, it was going to be at their expense, as you mentioned. And I think a big shock to employees about, oh my gosh, COBRA is expensive, but you're right. It's the insurance that's expensive. And up until that point, it was the employer paying for it. So we'll come back to that. And I want to talk about maybe some best practices for talking to employees, setting those expectations. It's sometimes which might be a really tough moment because it's the moment they're being let go, perhaps. But we'll come back to that. So what else is required by law? More than 20 employees offering benefits. You must offer to continue, though that will be at the employee's dime. I suppose as the employer, you could continue to pay, but
Correct.
no one would or does. What other requirements are there of the employer?
So that's just about it from a letter standpoint. So they've got to get that continuation notice sent out to them.
The continuation notice within 30 days.
It's 30 days from the date that their benefits end. So from the date that their benefits actually terminate, the employer has 30 days to get that notification out to that employee, offering them that continuation of benefits.
Got it. I'm going to split hairs a little bit just because I want to be precise for today. If I get fired from my job, I get laid off from my job, maybe that sounds nicer, on say May 20th, but I may be on benefits through the end of the month. So that 30-day clock starts ticking at that time. There are probably other plans that could say benefits end on your last day of employment, but it's pretty frequent for these to span an entire month. So it's 30 days from the month coverage ends. That's the important time frame, right?
Right. So whether your event date or end of month, if your benefits end, say on the 16th, it's 30 days from the 16th, or you're looking at 30 days from the end of the month if your benefits continue through that month.
Got it. Okay. Now, there's some real nitty-gritty requirements about these letters. What must be in the letters? What, even down to like formatting and fonts of these letters? What are the requirements for your continuing coverage notification letter to be compliant?
There's a lot, so out on the DOL website, there is a model notice out there that kind of gives you a general idea of the information that's out there. But, the first and foremost is, recognizing the employee and any of the family members, the cost of the plan, when the costs start, when the effective date of that plan is, what premiums are due on that plan. You have to list out all the eligible dependents, it's got to be real clear for them to understand. And even in some cases, offering them what the cost would be should they not continue for their whole family. So keep in mind, they're getting the option to continue the benefits, not just for themselves, but their family. But, as we've discussed from a cost perspective, maybe you're like, wow, I just really can't afford this for my whole family. My daughter's very ill. I'm just going to cover her. So the letter will actually outline all of the different costs associated with maybe one family coverage, the cost for just you and your spouse or the employee, where this needs to be returned to, what you need to do as far as how to elect, whether it's via the letter, maybe it's a third party that's doing it, and there's an online feature. But the big thing is just letting them know what their options are, how long they have to continue those benefits. So in most cases, it's 18 months. So it's letting them know when their potential end date would be. And then also, there's a marketplace link out there too, because ultimately the COBRA allows you that continuation until you find other benefits. But there's also other things out there too that employees can shop around for if they really can't just afford, the group plan that they had.
Got it. Okay. So you're more than 20 employees, you offer health benefits to your employees, so you have terminated an employee, you must send a notification. In the Department of Labor website has a model notification. You gotta follow the precise requirements, including what is the actual cost for all of the plan options. So if I had my whole family on this plan, and maybe I can't afford the entire family plan, I want to have just myself covered, maybe my spouse, one of my dependents covered, but all that must be in the letter, the notice letter. And then if the employee elects to continue their coverage, that can go on for up to 18 months. So let's stick. I think there are still some more nitty gritties in the letter itself. You made mention to me once that even goes down to like font. What does font have to do here?
So font size, the whole thing is the DOL wants to make sure that it's clear and precise as far as what your options are. So, maybe you're trying to shrink it down to a certain amount of pages and you make it smaller font, it might get overlooked, so that's how they kind of look at it from a legal standpoint. So, from paragraph spacing to the font size, you have to even be careful of, bolding certain sections because, obviously somebody might pay attention to one piece where they might miss something else, and then there's also the features in there too. They need to understand what happens if you are entitled to Medicare. If you have other benefits eligible, there's a lot of different pieces. Maybe you you file for disability and you're granted disability, you can actually get an extension on your COBRA. So there's a lot of what ifs that are on that letter that may never apply to you. And in some cases may apply to you, but it still has to be, mentioned.
But the law requires you as an employer to still notify that employee of those rights.
Correct.
All right. So let's say the employee elects the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Up until this point, as an employee, you just took the premium payment as a payroll deduction, right? So the $200 a month they were contributing, you just took out of a payroll deduction. How does the employee pay that now? And what are the requirements of you as an employer to be tracking those payments?
Yeah. So from the time that the member gets their packet, they have 60 days to make their decision as far as what they want to do. But keep in mind that 60 days starts that clock, but COBRA is reinstated retroactive back to the date that you lost your active policy. So there is no lapse in coverage. What I like to call it is there's a disruption in coverage, while you're taking that 60 days to decide what you want to do for you and your family.
And the 60 days, I'm sorry, is that's not from time of termination. That's time from the benefits lapsing.
Right. So from the time that they've been notified, they get 60 days to make a decision if they want to continue those benefits. Now, depending on where the notice is coming from, if it's coming directly from the employer, if it's coming from a third-party TPA, there's instructions in there as far as what they need to do to elect. So, it may say, return this to your former employer, in the form of a check, money order. Maybe there's a third party that's involved and that's handling this for the former employer. You might have some more options available, in addition to just checks and money orders. You might be able to use a credit card. You might be able to go online and make those elections, set up automatic drafts, through ACH or credit card. So really the instructions will be in that packet to them, depending on who's sending it out to them and where they're required to return it.
So if I'm a small business owner, I'm 15 minutes into this podcast, I'm like, oh my God, this is ridiculously complex. It is, and we want to make a big deal of how specific the requirements are. Is it also safe to say that your insurance company, whoever your carriers are, that you're providing, healthcare, vision, dental, they're going to have experiences, and they're going to help you, especially in the payment side?
So that's just one of the time frames. So from the date that you elect, you have 45 days to make your first payment. So keep in mind, if you're waiting out that 60 days, your 45 days might be 2 months worth of payment, because again, remember, it's reinstating retro back to the date the policy ended. So that protects the employee in ways where, maybe you were kind of waiting out the due dates. Maybe you were hoping to have other coverage, starting a new job in that time frame, but maybe something came up. Maybe there was an emergency, like you said. Maybe you had a car accident, or you were diagnosed with something, or you're not well. It gives you that time frame so that you can elect, and then you got a little bit of extra time there to make that payment. But it's not, a lot of misunderstanding too is from the member, because they're like, well, I didn't use it in April. I only need it for May. But it doesn't work like that. If you're going to obligate yourself to elect those benefits, you're getting it from the point that the benefits ended.
All right. So forgive me. I'm going to keep repeating the timeline and make sure I got it all right. So employees terminated. They have, you as an employer must give them written notification of their continuation of benefits rights. And then you got to deliver that within 30 days. The employee could temporarily choose to not elect benefits, say, oh my gosh, this is too expensive, I can't afford it. And they're out there pounding the pavement trying to find the next job, and they're banking on they're going to have something soon that will include benefits. And maybe they aren't successful finding a job. Maybe that job doesn't include benefits in the first 30 days. There's a probation period. Whatever the case is, they have 60 days to elect, and that can be retroactive. So I get my note. I'm a terminated employee. May 1st, I was let go. So I'll say May 30th, I was let go. So June 1st, I have no benefits. June goes by. In middle of July, I'm at a 4th of July picnic, and I get hurt in some fireworks accident. I don't know what kind of nonsense I'm making up here. I get hurt in some fireworks accident, but I'm not covered. I could retroactively elect coverage because I'm within this 60-day window, or I could have a heart attack, or I could get in a car accident, something really expensive. And I could elect coverage, but I'm going to have to pay the premiums retroactively from the time it first elapsed, which was like this use case, June 1st. Do I have it all right?
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah. Okay. And none of this costs. So you can see where the law was set up to provide more protections to employees, right? There's also a time where this didn't necessarily come as a big tax to the employer. The employer wasn't on the hook to pay for all this. The employees, the individuals had to pay for it, but the burden was on the employer to notify employees of rights. So this doesn't have to be super expensive for employers, but there's a lot of very specific aspects to the law that must be followed to the letter of the law to be compliant. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. What about anything else around payments? So you said, I might retroactively, so I get in a car accident in July, I elect COBRA. I got to pay the premiums for the couple months that I wasn't paying for this, but I got 45 days to pay it, right? Mm-hmm. Anything else for requirements of the employer for tracking all these payments to make sure that they're following the law?
Yeah, because if it's not confusing enough, after that period, payments then become due at the 1st of every month with a 30-day grace period. So COBRA is a month-to-month commitment, so once you sign up, you're not stuck in it for 18 months. It's there kind of for you to use as needed each month. The payments will eventually be due at the 1st of each month after you hit that 45-day period, and then you'll have a 30-day grace period to have that payment postmarked. So whether you're making it online or postmarked, your payment could be due on the 31st, and you could mail your payment out that day. And now you may see a little bit of disruption when you're waiting to the last minute to make your payment like that. But once that payment arrives, whether it's to the TPA, whether it's to the employer, you have to honor that postmark. So then, the benefits could then be reinstated if there was any disruption period. And then from that point forward, they would be due at the 1st of every month. Now, keep in mind, because this is a group plan, The employee is still entitled to the open enrollment and renewal rights, just like an active employee would be. So if plans are changing, if plans are increasing while you're on COBRA, you are also entitled to those same changes and increases. So
that's really important. Yes, I'm just envisioning how an employer could easily miss that. You have an employee who's elected COBRA. By definition, if they can be on it for 18 months, you probably have an open enrollment every single year where the benefits plans change and the
correct.
offerings change. If your internal HR processes are set up to communicate with your employees, it could be an easy miss not to communicate this to a former employee on COBRA.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It does get missed a lot of times. Like they're like, oh, I didn't know. Like I didn't even think about that.
Right.
Because, I think people get wrapped up in the word, oh, it's COBRA insurance, but it is that group plan. So those same rules follow along, whether you're actively working and participating on it, or if you're a former employee there and you're participating on that plan, but everybody's entitled to the same changes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to dial back. I'm going to go to this 20 employee marker. Is this 20 human beings who get a paycheck, no matter how large or small? Is this 20 full-time equivalents? What is, how do we draw this line for 20 employees?
So it's 20 full-time employees, but it's all employees too. So you got to keep in mind when you're figuring out like your prior year count.
Yeah.
So you count all employees, whether they're on your benefits or not. Because eventually one of those people could be entitled to benefits down the road. Maybe they're not on your benefits now. Maybe they're on a spouse's plan, or maybe they're not eligible because they're part-time. Now, the way the Department of Labor looks at the part-time people is like a half employee. So, if you have two part-time employees, that becomes one employee. And it's usually based off the prior year.
This is so interesting because all these different laws have different calculations for what an FTE is. And so,
right.
So in this case, so full-time is greater than 30 hours a week, I assume?
Yes.
So full-time is greater than 30 hours a week. If you're less than 30 hours a week, you're a part-time. And two part-times equal one full-time.
Yes.
Okay. And the 20 employee threshold is just employees, period, not employees who have elected benefits. So
right.
You could have 25 employees, only 15 of them are on your benefits. You could make a mistake as an employer thinking, oh, COBRA doesn't apply to me because I've only got 15 people on benefits. No, you have 25 employees and you must comply, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then just to make it clear on the part-timers, if I've got maybe 5 full-time staff. I runs kind of the office and the operation, and I've got I don't know, maybe I've got 20 part-time people. Just the nature of my business. Maybe it's retail. I got 5 core people, store managers, office people, bookkeepers, whatever. And then 20 part-timers. Those 20 equals 10 FTEs plus my 5. So I'm 25 bodies, humans, but I'm really only 15. It doesn't apply to me, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
How about seasonality, Heather? Is there a seasonality component? Because some folks, maybe you run a golf course or a landscaping company, maybe you retail and you staff up around the holidays. What is the requirement here? Is it based on an average of prior year?
Yes. Yeah, that's why they have that prior year look back, because it would be hard if you are seasonal, especially if you're a restaurant, hiring around the holidays. So it's looking back over the previous plan year. So your previous year, you do that calculation for your employees.
And is it always only prior year? So if I have, let's say I'm a growing firm, business is good. Last year, 2 years ago, I was 10 employees. Last year, I was 15 employees. This year, I'm 23 employees. Must I comply this year, or is it only based on the look back of last year's 15?
So you're calculating your look back into the current year. So you may have to go back and look at, so you may not have had to offer it from the year before. But then when you go into your current year and you're calculating your total of your prior year to your current year, then yes. So that's kind of just, especially with the way your plan years work, because not everybody's on a calendar year too. So, a lot of times they have that misunderstanding. It's like, oh, well, I only have like 5 people on my plan, from the previous year. So you have those scenarios too.
So the year is based on your plan year, not your calendar year. So pretty common that folks are going to have an open enrollment sometime in the fall, and they might have a November 1, October 1 new plan year that is different than the calendar, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's like a big misconception too, because there's, a lot of people think your plans have to run on a calendar year, but your plans really can start at wherever you're going to have like those 12 consecutive months
Right.
For that plan.
Right. And then, so did I understand then? So there's the prior year look back. So if I'm a steady business and I'm growing either slowly or shrinking slowly in headcount, then you can just use your look back. But if I'm a fast growing company and last year I had the 15 FTEs and this year I've got 25, do I have to start complying the moment I cross the 20?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what if I'm a business that's either in decline or maybe I'm just becoming more productive, that I'm able to generate more revenue with fewer headcount due to automation or whatever, AI, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so maybe last year I had 22 employees full time, and so I've had to comply with COBRA, but I'm more efficient, and now I have 18 employees. Do I still have to comply because of prior year, or do
yes.
So even though I drop below the threshold, mm-hmm. I must still comply based on prior year calc?
Right. So okay. Then you're going to base that off of where your count is through the remainder of this year. So where it would drop off. So if you don't end up increasing and you get smaller and smaller into that next year, then no, then you're kind of out of that window.
So businesses either in decline or just decreasing employee count, you still must comply based on prior year. But if you're a growing business, this is where the growing businesses get trapped, mm-hmm. because they don't know about this. They've never had to comply with this before. Maybe last year you had 15, but as soon as you cross the threshold of 20, you now must comply.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, because that definitely protects the employees and their rights.
Yeah, which is why I mentioned at the top of the conversation, it's the growing businesses that really need to become aware of this. So
correct.
I'll just say the ask here is, hey, if if you don't know what you don't know, so if you've got 15 employees and you're growing like crazy, you might not be listening to this podcast or watching on YouTube or something. But if you got a friend who fits that category, share this with them because they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
Okay. What are any other requirements? I want to talk about. I want to talk about what bad thing happens if you don't comply. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about what is and is not a qualifying event. Those are a couple buckets here. But is there anything else about the law and what the law requires of employers to impact?
No, I think we've covered the majority of it that would impact most groups for sure.
So you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, Heather, and maybe before we go to those other topics, different types of insurance. So mm-hmm. you said you've seen employers make the mistake thinking, oh, well, they don't have full health. They just have vision or they just have dental. COBRA doesn't apply to them. But that's not true, right?
Correct.
So where are the lines in the sand on this thing? Is it I mean, we know the big three. You got health, vision, dental, but what about pharmacy? What about pet insurance? What about Cadillac plans that are very discreet in the services that are eligible for reimbursement? Where do you draw the line in the sand?
Yeah, so your medical, dental, vision, those are the popular ones, obviously, but there are some pharmacy like prescription plans, your wellness plans, some of your wellness, like your employee assistance programs, because again, that kind of falls under the health side. And then, of course, like your flexible spending accounts, your health reimbursement accounts, these also are entitled for COBRA, especially on your FSA if you're not overspent. So in a situation where maybe you contribute $500, you've elected 1,000, you've contributed 500, but maybe you terminate and didn't use any of that FSA dollars. You still have the right to continue that under COBRA, because remember, when you terminate from an FSA, you're not allowed to incur new dates of expenses. So COBRA continuation allows you to incur new dates of services. Now you're paying on the plan, no longer pre-taxed, but you're still able to contribute into it through the remainder of that plan year and still pay into it to incur new dates of services. Because you might be an employee that's like, well, I don't have anything. That's why I haven't used it. So this will allow you to at least go to the doctors, maybe pick up some prescriptions, different things like that. And then same kind of with your health reimbursement account with the employers that are contributing to those funds, in that account. It allows you the opportunity to continue those benefits. Now, when you get into like life insurances and things like that, those are not COBRA eligible plans.
Okay.
Because they're really not providing an actual care. It might be something more long-term, you're preparing for your future or your family's future. But those are not considered like an actual care that you're receiving.
Is it fair to say, if we were to give guidance to employers here, 2 resources would be: one, Department of Labor website probably is pretty clear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll try to include a link to DOL website that will help in the show notes here for folks.
Mm-hmm.
And then number 2, your insurance carriers will know what is and isn't COBRA eligible, I assume.
Yes. They're very helpful in that process for sure.
Yeah, right. Okay, so let's talk about qualifying event. So, well, I'll give it to you. First of all, how do we define a qualifying event?
So qualifying event, and I hate to say like COBRA is always for like when you terminate, because it's not. It's the best way to describe it would be like anytime you're losing those benefits. So, you could be a part-timer. So you could be full-time, moving to part-time, and you're no longer eligible for benefits. So that's considered a qualifying event. You're now able to continue those benefits, even though you still actually work there. You get the opportunity to continue those. So whether you're terming, on your own, whether you're involuntarily terminated, so maybe there was a RIF or you were let go, or downsizing, any of those types of things, those impact your eligibility. Keep in mind too, like we talked about earlier, is it's not just you as well. This is your dependents too. So maybe you're an employee that's still actively working there and you unfortunately get divorced. Your spouse and your dependents are also offered those benefits to continue as a second qualifying event. So if you have a child that ages off your plan, so maybe you're a full family and your child turns 26, in most cases, 26 is what's recognized. That child then needs to be offered, well, not really a child anymore, but that member of your family now needs to be offered the continuation rights. And in most cases, they might have their first job and now they have, the opportunity to go on to their own benefits.
I never even considered that one. So you're an active employee.
Mm-hmm.
You've got full family coverage. You've got a 25-year-old dependent. They turn 26. They technically lose benefits. They have the right to elect COBRA?
Correct.
Wow, yep. I had no idea.
Yeah, because in most cases, the insurance company is recognizing that, that child has now reached an age where most likely that there is an opportunity for them to get their own benefits. Maybe it's through schooling, maybe it's their job. But still, it's going to give them that opportunity that it's not just kicking them off the plan and it's like you have to go on to something else. It's allowing them still the same opportunity to continue those benefits, because maybe maybe they do have their first job, but maybe it doesn't start for 3 months. So maybe they're not going to have, any benefits. So COBRA protects them too, because it's
Yeah.
allowing them to continue those benefits until something else starts or comes along.
Yeah. Interesting.
And now a little bit different from your normal, reduction in hours, termination, involuntary. When we get into those second qualifying events like divorce or even death, keep in mind if the employee working passes away and the spouse and children or the spouse are on the plan, that's now impacted them as a family. So they're going to get the option to continue those rights, to continue the benefits as well. Now, the only difference from losing your benefits as part-time or termination, involuntary termination, when you have a second qualifying event like that with child aging out or divorce or death, you're actually entitled to COBRA longer than the 18 months. The DOL recognizes up to 36 months for you to continue those benefits because it may be a little bit harder for you to find benefits, because you are the dependent. So, maybe the spouse is a stay-at-home mom, that's divorced, or if the employee passes away and now you've got to go try to find other benefits that wouldn't be readily available to you through an employer.
Got it. So qualifying events. I feel like I kind of knew COBRA until today. So lots more qualifying events, especially on impacted spouse and dependents of these plans. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those are probably the most popular, and it's a confusing topic a lot of times, especially when we work with our employer groups. They just don't even realize that. They're like, we didn't even think about that.
Right.
They're like, the employee still works here. Like, why would anyone get COBRA? So it's important for them to understand, especially your smaller groups, because those things don't happen all that often, for them. But, when they do happen, they have to pay attention.
Heather, that's a perfect segue. So 2 topics I want to talk before we wrap. One is, what are the most common and biggest mistakes employers make? And that certainly is one. And then I want to talk about what kind of teeth does the Department of Labor have here for employers who mess up. But give us your top 3, top 5. What are the most common mistakes employers make here in regards to administration of COBRA?
The most common that we run across are employer groups will ask the employee, as they're exiting, the company, if they plan on continuing benefits, or the member might have told them that, hey, I'm starting a new job and I'm going to have new benefits. So the employer's like, oh, cool, I'm good. I don't have to send them anything. Wrong. Unfortunately, whether for a fact that Bob has other benefits available to him, you still have to send Bob a letter. Whether he's going to throw it away, never open it, shred it, use it as a coaster, he still has to receive that letter in the mail. And then that takes the responsibility off the employer, because they've done their job. Because maybe Bob doesn't end up getting that job, maybe it falls through,
or maybe Bob's significant other doesn't agree.
Yeah,
to decline, right?
Yeah, for sure. So that's a biggie that happens. In addition to them just like, well, they only had vision, so we didn't offer them. Or the big thing too is the dependents. They don't think about the divorce and the death, or children coming of age. They just think that it's like, okay, well, they probably have other benefits. I don't have to send anything out to them. So those are probably the biggest things. Is they're like, well, we asked them, or we dropped an email letter to them, and they didn't respond. That's another big thing. So a lot of employer groups that do it internally think that it's okay to email something. It's not. It has to still go out through U.S. mail, because the potential of, you can now email them, but it has to still go via the U.S. mail as well.
You know what? Good on you if you're an employer and you got a good relationship with your employee and you can have a cordial exit, whether it's their choice or not. to have that conversation, and nothing wrong with having the conversation. Hey, do you want to extend?
Sure.
But that does not absolve you from actually sending the written communication that you have. Maybe last thing. How about record keeping here? What do you as an employer have to retain to prove that you sent these notices?
So the nice thing is that the Department of Labor does give a little bit of, relief to the employer. Is the employer is only required to send the letter out to the last known address they have on file.
Okay.
So if you as the employee did not tell your employer that you've moved, at the time of termination or even before you terminated, the employer's only responsibility is to send it to the last known address that they know.
Yeah.
They don't have to send anything, no proof of mailing. They don't have to do anything like that.
Well, how do you defend yourself if you is it he said she said, hey, I never a former employee, I never received that notice. Employer said, well, I sent it. How do you prove it?
They don't. I mean, again, it's not a requirement that they have to use like proof of mail. I recommend it to employer groups if they're doing it in-house, just because they don't have a lot of that backing to make sure that, if they're doing certain things properly. But it just has to go out, U.S. mail that into a last known address.
What would be considered a best practice for you've used the term TPA, that stands for third party administrator. So if you're an employer and use somebody like Asure to be your TPA and keep you compliant, or you do it yourself as an employer, what would be the best practice you'd recommend for record retention and proving that you didn't send these notices?
Personally, like when you are doing it internally and you're not having the support, of a company like Asure or a third party TPA, I always recommend like a proof of mail, because that really just kind of protects them and they have it on file, especially because sometimes employees might take advantage of the fact that their employer may not fully understand how that process works. So, just to kind of protect them and just to keep it in the employee's file, they will have that kind of proof. And there's some pretty inexpensive ways of, they can do like, a certificate of like proof of delivery, proof that it was sent. But keep in mind too, the Department of Labor, though, always out for, obviously the employees' rights. They do take into some consideration too that the employers, have done their job. We've run into situations before where an employee might say, hey, I never got that packet. The Department of Labor, and if they call into the Department of Labor, all they care about is righting a wrong. So they're not going to come at you right out the gate and be like, you owe several $100s because you didn't send this packet out. They will actually allow the opportunity for the employer to resend it, to make right of a situation. Maybe it got forgotten, or maybe the employee's like, well, I never got it. They'll allow them the opportunity to remail that if need be. So first and foremost, if the Department of Labor gets involved initially, they want to right a wrong. If something didn't get mailed in time, or if it, didn't get received, they're going to allow the opportunity for that employer to do it.
Heather, is it safe to say I almost feel like being, playing the role of Asure's attorney here? We're not guiding people to say, hey, you don't have to comply because the DOL is going to give you a grace period. There are potential fines, but you're suggesting that practical experience would tell us
Correct.
that, hey, they usually just want to right a wrong. They give benefit of the doubt frequently. Right. That doesn't mean that you will get benefit of the doubt, and that it doesn't mean you shouldn't try to comply, right?
Yeah. My whole thing to employers is I'm like, don't panic. It's very different from I sent it and he said he didn't get it versus I'm not sending that to him. Very different conversation, especially if you have, a situation with the Department of Labor. Obviously, you want to make sure you're getting those letters out.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing.
Heather, what bad thing can happen? So let's say Department of Labor, maybe their first inclination is to work with you, but there has to be, though it's rare, this is why you have insurance, is to protect you from rare instances, that employee is terminated. Maybe they quit, you let them go, doesn't matter. And you didn't send them the notice. You had a conversation. Hey, do you want to continue benefits? No. screw you, I'm out of here. I want nothing to do with you guys
Hmm.
ever again. I don't want benefits. You're like, screw it. Okay. I'm not sending you a notification. I asked you, you said no. And 45 days later, that person has a heart attack. They drop dead, massive medical bills. All of a sudden, spouse is like, I have no insurance to pay for any of this. They never sent me notification. There's nothing to be righted here. This is
Hmm.
all bad.
Yep.
What, how extreme is the risk for the employer? I mean, are they on the hook for,
Oh yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
take us through what could they be on the hook for?
So potentially it's about $100 to $115 a day. It kind of varies there. At a minimum, it's $100 fine per day that member is not offered COBRA. Up to $200 per day if they have dependents. So right off the bat there, you're looking at quite a bit of quite a bit of fees there if you're not
Yeah.
offering the COBRA.
Yeah.
But then it could get so bad that the member could hire an attorney. If the attorney gets involved, the employer could be on the hook for attorney fees, costs related to the medical insurance. They might have to pay for a portion of the premiums, to continue those benefits. Just depends, what the lawyer is looking for from that perspective. But I mean, it could close a business. Like it's that extreme. When you start messing with people's insurance,
Yeah.
It could be pretty hefty. Now you could have very different scenarios. You could have an employee that simply reaches out and they're like, "Hey, I never got my packet." And then they go to the Department of Labor, and then you have some of the employees that just go right to an attorney's office, and that's a
Right.
very different situation, and could get
Right.
very costly very quickly.
Yeah. Right. Right. All right, Heather. I think we covered it. We talked about what COBRA is. We talked about the requirements of employers. So greater than 20 employees, you got 30 days to send the notice. The employee has an additional 60 days after that 30-day time period to elect coverage. They can do so retroactively. Once they elect, they have 45 days to pay. And after that, they got to pay in the first of every month with a 30-day grace period. If you offer any benefits whatsoever, vision, dental doesn't have to be just a traditional health plan. You must offer COBRA. The places that you said employers get in the most trouble is that they verbally ask an employee and an employee declines rather than sending formal notice. They got to send formal notice. Number two is they think that they don't have to comply because it's just vision or it's just dental. No, it's all health coverages. And a sneaky one is dependents. Somebody ages out, a child 26 years old, they're dependent. They are COBRA eligible. And then the last one, change in status of an employee. Maybe a full-time employee had benefits. They still work for you. They're part-time. They are no longer benefit eligible. That's a change in benefits. That's a COBRA qualifying event. And then the last thing, your guidance is that Department of Labor will work with folks. So communicate.
Yes.
Know that it could be minimum of $100 a day fine, of minimum $200 a day fines, including dependents, for days that you're not in compliance.
Correct.
And who the heck knows how much it could cost you to either defend or in a lawsuit. God forbid somebody gets sick and dies or has a car accident uninsured because you didn't follow the law here. Anything you want to say in closing?
Well, and kind of last piece there too is you kind of open yourself up to, because you could be now set up for an audit, because now the Department of Labor may be like, hey, you didn't send it out for this guy or this guy. Like, let's see how many more have been missed.
Right.
So that's probably the last final piece I want to say there, because it is extremely important. One little letter can cause so many expenses for an employer.
And one thing you do not want is a Department of Labor auditor in your office rifling through all your records, because it's probably not going to stop with, just like you said, it's not going to stop with the employee who complained that they weren't notified, they're at minimum going to go back years to see who else you didn't notify, and there probably will be fines coming. But once they're in there, you could find yourself a subject of a full wage and hour audit. Are you classifying your employees correctly, exempt, non-exempt, 1099? Are you paying overtime correctly? These things can get real ugly real fast. There's a lot of specificity to comply with COBRA, but it's also pretty black and white, and it doesn't, other than the administrative burden, it doesn't cost employers any money. This is one of those things. It's just insane not to comply, and dare I say, kind of crazy to even take that on yourself, because outsourcing it really does not cost much money to somebody like an Asure or a third-party administrator.
Sure.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Heather, always enjoy talking to you. There's, as is most things, it's deeper water than you expect at first glance. So there's a lot here for employers to understand. But I thank you very much for being my guest and sharing all your information and your knowledge with our guests.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And to everyone else, if you got value from today's show, if you like today's show, please comment, share, share this content with a friend, and subscribe. Until next week, we will see you on Mission to Grow. That's it for this episode of Mission to Grow. Thanks for joining us today. For show notes and more episodes, visit us at missiontogrow.com. If you found this content valuable, I invite you to share it with a friend and subscribe to the show. If you really want to help, I'd love it if you left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen. Mission to Grow is sponsored by Asure. Asure helps more than 100,000 businesses get access to capital, stay compliant, and develop the talent they need to grow. To learn more about how Asure can help your business grow, visit AsureSoftware.com. Until next time.